Number 8. Goonew's final show. The police in Prince George's County, Maryland, were called to the scene of a reported shooting on the evening of March the 18th of 2022. Upon their arrival, officers came upon a male victim identified as rapper Goonew, who was in critical condition after suffering a gunshot wound. He was pronounced dead at a local hospital a few hours later. Shortly after 24-year-old Goonew's passing, it was reported that a funeral was to be held at the Bliss nightclub in Washington, D.C. On the day of the memorial service, footage from inside the venue went viral on social media. Part of the arrangements meant to honor the deceased rapper involved having his embalmed corpse propped up on the dance floor overlooking the crowd. The macabre funeral subsequently faced heavy criticism from the general public, with many calling the presentation of the man's body sick and disturbing. The nightclub itself released a statement in the wake of the incident, claiming they hadn't been aware of the bizarre tribute ahead of time and apologized to anyone who was offended. Number 7. Nicole Flanagan. The lifeless body of a high-end New York City escort was found inside a 55-gallon barrel in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, on August 13th of 2021. The authorities had been alerted to the large plastic drum after local residents had complained of a repulsive smell emanating from it. The woman was identified as 42-year-old Nicole Flanagan, who'd last been seen alive on August 6th. Surveillance cameras at a financial district apartment building had captured her in an elevator with Aquio Parker, an alleged member of New York City's notorious Snow Gang. 5 days later, security footage showed Parker bringing the barrel in which Flanagan was later found into the building. The following day, he and an unidentified accomplice were spotted wheeling the container into the back of a U-Haul van and driving away from the apartment building. Although Flanagan's body showed no visible signs of physical trauma, a warrant for Parker's arrest was issued, and he ultimately surrendered to the authorities. He was charged with being an accomplice to disturbing, moving, and/or concealing human remains. As of the case's latest updates, investigators had theorized that Flanagan had fatally overdosed during her time in Parker's apartment. Rather than call the emergency services or render aid to the escort himself, however, the man had allegedly opted to dispose of her body. Number 6. Christy Giles and Hilda Marcela Cabreles Arzola. On November the 13th of 2021, two masked men driving a black sedan with no license plates dropped an unconscious woman off outside Southern California Hospital in Culver City. A short time later, the duo drove to Kaiser Permanente West Los Angeles Hospital, where they abandoned a second unresponsive woman on the sidewalk. The first patient, who was identified as 24-year-old Christy Giles, was pronounced dead shortly after her arrival. The second, a friend of Giles's named Hilda Marcela Cabreles Arzola, was kept in critical condition at the hospital until her eventual death 11 days later on November the 24th. According to an official report released by the Los Angeles Police Department, the victims were believed to have been given a myriad of illegal substances that ultimately led to them fatally overdosing. The following month, the LAPD placed 3 men named as David Pierce, Michael Ansbach, and Brant Osborne under arrest. Pierce was charged with manslaughter in connection to the 2 women's deaths, while the latter 2 faced charges of accessory to manslaughter. As the investigation progressed, detectives gathered that during a night out at various clubs, the victims had been lured to Pierce's apartment in the 8600 block of Olympic Boulevard, where the 3 suspects provided them with a cocktail of drugs that caused them to fall unconscious. Rather than contact emergency services, however, Pierce removed the license plates on his vehicle and called upon his 2 accomplices to help him discard the women's bodies outside the hospitals. It subsequently emerged that Pierce, a film producer from Beverly Hills, was also being charged with assault in connection to an unrelated case involving 4 alleged victims. The man pleaded not guilty to the various offenses of which he was accused as he awaited the commencement of his criminal trial. Number 5. Takila Gross. 30-year-old Takila Gross was gunned down near a club in Marshall County, Mississippi, in the early morning hours of April the 24th of 2022. According to the county sheriff's office, the pregnant mother of 2 had been spending the night out with friends. when the fatal incident occurred at roughly 2:30 a.m. Around that time, a gunfight erupted between several individuals outside Roosevelt's Club on Highway 309 South. Gross, who was sitting in a parked vehicle nearby, was struck in the head by a stray bullet. Initially, the driver of the car reportedly thought the woman was having a seizure, but then quickly realized that she'd suffered a critical gunshot wound, by which time it was already too late to render aid. The man who'd inadvertently killed her fled the scene, but within hours, he was identified by the authorities as 38-year-old Andre Norman, whom Gross had never met. The police tracked Norman down later on the day of the incident and took him into custody on a charge of first-degree murder. He was subsequently held in county jail on a $1 million bond, pending the commencement of his case's legal proceedings. Number 4. Jessica Lally. In October of 2021, a woman from South Yorkshire, England, was spending a night out with friends at Broncos Rodeo, an American-themed bar and restaurant in Sheffield. According to subsequent reports, 26-year-old Jessica Lally became unresponsive after falling off a mechanical bull set up in-house at the restaurant. Although she'd reportedly fallen onto a padded area, she then went into cardiac arrest and, shortly thereafter, passed away. The tragic incident wasn't caused by the mechanical bull itself. According to the findings of a subsequent investigation, the general manager of the establishment detailed that the machine had been moving at the lowest speed setting when Lally fell and lost consciousness. It was thus determined that the young woman's heart attack had been completely unrelated to any external factors, including the force with which she'd impacted the ground. Lally, a manager at a jewelry store in Rotherham, was reportedly in the process of planning her wedding at the time of her abrupt death. Number 3. The Blue Lantern Club Stampede. On the evening of October the 8th of 2018, dozens were injured in a stampede outside the Blue Lantern Club in the town of Corinaldo, central Italy. Subsequent reports indicated that the nightclub had been occupied by more than 1,000 people who were there to watch a live performance by rapper Safira e Basta. According to a statement by the local fire service, the crowd had been sent into a full-blown panic following the dispersal of a stinging substance, likely pepper spray. Clubgoers ran for the emergency exits and consequently trampled over each other. The force of the fleeing crowd ultimately caused the railing to collapse onto a concentrated mass of people, 6 of whom passed away and nearly 200 others who were left injured. In August of 2019, the BBC reported that Italian authorities had taken 7 men into custody on manslaughter charges in connection to the fatal stampede. On the night of the concert, the suspects had allegedly been using pepper spray to rob people, a course of action determined to have been the initial cause of the panic. The police also stated that there had been about 1,400 attendees gathered in the club that night, in spite of the venue's reported maximum capacity being less than 900 people. Today's topic was requested by Scott Morgan. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. The shooting of Kasmira Nash. In the early morning hours of May the 1st of 2021, police in Louisville, Kentucky received reports of shots fired at the Vibes restaurant and Ultra Lounge in the 1300 block of River Road. When responding officers arrived at the scene, they reportedly found a man and woman suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. The female victim, who was identified as a bartender at the nightclub called Kasmira Nash, was pronounced dead at the scene. The man was transported to University of Louisville Hospital with what were described as non-life-threatening injuries. The Louisville Metro Police Department subsequently reported that at the time of the deadly incident, the venue had been well attended due to it having occurred on the same weekend as the Kentucky Derby. Investigators quickly identified Ronnie O'Bannon, the longtime DJ for prominent rapper Jack Harlow, as the primary person of interest in Nash's shooting. Less than a year prior to the latter incident, O'Bannon had allegedly shot and killed Nash's cousin, Torrey 4, following an altercation at the exclusive nightclub in Shively. On the night of her death, Nash had confronted O'Bannon, who ultimately gunned her down in the middle of the crowded club. In December of 2021, Nash's family filed a lawsuit against the owners of Vibes Restaurant and Ultra Lounge, claiming that they'd failed to secure the venue by negligently allowing certain attendees to bypass the security screening required for all others. As of the latest updates on the case, O'Bannon's defense team had requested he be granted immunity from prosecution, arguing that he'd acted in self-defense on the night of the fatal shooting. Number 1. Connor Hayes. 20-year-old Connor Hayes got into an altercation with a club bouncer during a night out with friends on March the 8th of 2017. The young man had been attempting to negotiate the re-entry of a companion who had briefly left the Spenceley's Emporium in North Yorkshire, England. A cell phone video taken by an eyewitness showed Hayes pleading his case to the security worker at about 12:45 a.m. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, the latter punched and knocked him unconscious. Hayes' friend came to his defense, but he too was viciously struck by the bad-tempered bouncer. It was reported that Hayes, an employee at a Papa John's location on Linthorpe Road, Middlesbrough, required hospitalization to repair the badly broken nose inflicted by the bouncer. When speaking to reporters in the incident's aftermath, the young man described how his friend had left the club to get some money, but was stopped at the door upon his return. He'd attempted to explain the situation, but the club worker became increasingly agitated until he eventually lashed out in violence. Subsequent reports indicated that local police had opened an investigation into the matter to determine whether criminal charges were warranted. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a mandatory curfew of 6 p.m. or only be allowed to go 10 miles from your house? Let us know in the comments section below.